Have you ever thought about just how dark some Disney movies actually get?
Yeah. Isn't it great?
We've got all the times Disney shocked us with just how disturbing they got. From skinning puppies to throwing babies in wells, we're still not over some of these scenes. Number 1. We all remember Carl Fredricksen's loss in Up. This famous movie moment was a doozy. Up's opening sequence left us feeling way too emotional for the start of a Disney movie. We watch Carl and his wife Ellie in their youth, from getting married to planning for a baby, and then things go south. They suffer from a miscarriage, and then Carl loses his wife. Sure, this scene reflects real life, and it helped the audience warm up to Carl, but this tear-jerking moment hurt too much. Number 2. Up wasn't the only Disney movie to deal with mortality.
I don't think that's daylight.
Do you remember what happened to the toys in Toy Story 3? The toys in the Toy Story franchise dealt with some serious topics from the beginning. From jealousy to abandonment to, well, torture.
No! No!
These toys have been through it over the years.
Oh, Barbie! Those were vintage!
In Toy Story 3, however, they are forced to come to terms with what their future will look like once Andy leaves for college. That in itself is quite a heavy concept for toys and young viewers alike, but then they also come face to face with their imminent demise in a garbage incinerator. We even see the characters holding hands as they accept their horrific fate. All we have to say about this one is yikes. Don't worry, not all of our videos are yikes-inducing. Don't forget to like and subscribe to The Things Animated to see more. Number 3. Speaking of yikes-inducing, and the concept of mortality, of course, who could forget about Bambi's mom? The fate of Bambi's mom is one of the most memorable dark moments in Disney history, and it definitely lives up to the hype. We all remember when the hunters get Bambi's mom, and Bambi is left defenseless and scared as he searches for her. This classic does get a bit cheerier from there, but there's a reason that this is the part of the movie that really sticks with us. Number 4. Tarzan and Bambi have one very sad thing in common, but that's just one of the tragedies in Tarzan. Tarzan's parents also meet a rather grisly end, and while it happens off-screen, we see some pretty disturbing aftermath. That's plenty of horrifying content for one movie, but Disney didn't stop there. They also made sure that the film's main villain, Clayton, met his demise in a similarly gruesome way. We basically watch him accidentally hang himself on some vines. Guess that's what happens when you mess with the jungle. Number 5. So, what happens when you mess with the king of the jungle? Well, that doesn't end well either. But knowing that doesn't make rewatching Mufasa meet his maker any easier. Scar throws his very own brother off of a cliff while little Simba watches in fear. It's bad enough that Simba has to watch his own dad take a fatal fall, but we have to watch too? That's just not fair.
Dad, come on. You gotta get up.
Almost as unfair is the fact that Scar then blames Simba for Mufasa's fate and then sends his hyenas to get him. Scar really is pure evil, but when it comes to Disney villains, he's definitely not the only one. Number 6. Cruella de Vil also fits into that category. Sure, with a name like Cruella de Vil, she was set up for a somewhat immoral existence, but come on, skinning puppies? Puppies! Kidnapping puppies and skinning them is the darkest of the dark as it is, but it manages to get even worse, because she actually plans on wearing their furs after? She really does live up to her name. She is a cruel devil. Number 7. From watching someone hurt puppies to witnessing the terrifying aftermath of war, Disney's darkness is all over the map. Literally and figuratively, this horrific moment takes us to China. During one of the movie's best bangers, A Girl Worth Fighting For, we're abruptly hit with this. We're fully expecting a grand finale for this satirical bop when all of a sudden we're met with the realities of war. Mulan and her fellow soldiers return to their village to see everything completely destroyed. This scene does a great job of illustrating how all joy is stolen during wartime. But come on, isn't this supposed to be an uplifting movie? Number 8. Speaking of uplifting movies, just kidding. We've got The Black Cauldron. If you're thinking The Black Cauldron isn't that bad, then we're guessing that you don't know about the deleted scenes. The Black Cauldron was actually the first PG-rated Disney movie, but that wasn't until after a whopping 10 minutes of content was cut. This axed footage included some disturbing stuff, like a character getting their neck and torso cut open and some mist that dissolves human skin. Yes, you heard that right, and yes, we do see said mist in action, and it's pretty horrifying. Number 9. That will be Judge Claude Frollo.
Excuse me.
They may not be quite as fancy as the Mist, but the Hunchback of Notre Dame villain did have a staircase and a well, and he used them to deliver a pretty dark Disney moment. During the Bells of Notre Dame, Judge Claude Frollo pushes Quasimodo's mother down the stairs to her death. He then goes to throw her baby into a well, saying,
This is an unholy demon. I'm sending it back to hell.
The song does say that Judge Frollo saw corruption everywhere except within, and we think this sounds about right, since he's the only unholy demon in this scene. If you're hoping that this is the last moment on this list where a child loses their mother, we're sorry to disappoint you. Number 10. Disney loves a main character with a deceased mother, and The Fox and the Hound is no exception. Todd gets abandoned by his mother, and then we hear gunshots. Unfortunately, we all know what that means. Later, after making a friend, Cooper, Todd finds out that Cooper's owner, Amos, caused the gunshots at the movie's start. Dear Amos, we hate you. Sincerely, everyone.
That thing's loaded!
Luckily, not every Disney villain is totally hateable. Some of them are actually beloved, like... Number 11, Dr. Facilier from Princess and the Frog. He's not a good guy per se. He is trying to sell innocent people's souls to his friends on the other side, so we'll admit that the bar is pretty low here, but he's become one of the most popular fan-favorite Disney villains. Unfortunately, his popularity didn't stop this voodoo witch doctor from meeting a very unfortunate fate. They cut out the middleman here, and he's dragged directly to hell while begging for mercy. Luckily, his demonic friends perform a lively song as he's dragged to his final resting place to soften the blow a bit. But as much as we love catchy musical numbers, they can't make every dark moment easy to swallow. Number 12. Catchy musical numbers abound as we watch poor Belle succumb to her beastly love story. And while they may have distracted us from the faults at the core of Beauty and the Beast, it's time to talk about them. First, the Beast imprisons Belle's father in his castle just for trespassing. Then he trades him for his daughter, treats her horribly, and says she can never escape. So while you may not have thought of this as a dark Disney moment before, it is pretty disturbing that these two end up together. Oh, and let's not forget about those skulls in Gaston's eyes when he takes that deadly fall. That's pretty dark too. Number 13. If a beast and a human falling in love isn't weird enough for you, how about human children turning into donkeys?
What's he think I look like? A jackass?
We have Pinocchio to thank for giving us this idea. Children are turned into donkeys and sold, and it seems like they stay that way forever. Sheesh. We're just thankful that Pinocchio isn't a true story. Number 14. We can't say the same for Pocahontas, however. And while this movie took enough artistic liberties to make this seem like a love story, the real story is far from it. In real life, Pocahontas was almost certainly forced into her marriage. So while movie Pocahontas made the right choice to send this toxic man out to sea, they're trying really hard to make colonialism seem more romantic than horrifying. Consequently, this is a dark moment either way. Sorry we had to remind you of all those scarring Disney moments. Can you believe they got away with some of that stuff?
You saw nothing.
I wish I saw nothing.
What's worse, Woody and Bo Peep going through a bad breakup, or Woody being completely evil? If you can believe it, both of these things almost happened. And there's more where that came from. There are quite a few Disney Pixar movies that almost had some very disturbing endings. Number 1. The Lion King had some dark moments, but things were almost much worse. Simba and Scar's fight scene nearly ended with Scar tricking Simba and throwing him into a pit of flames. Simba would have landed in a tree, but Scar wouldn't notice this and instead laughed victoriously, believing he'd successfully launched his own nephew into a fire. As if Scar wasn't already bad enough, he somehow could have been worse.
Life's not fair, is it?
Number 2. Do you know the upsetting story of the version of Lilo and Stitch that could have been? Fans of the movie remember the air chase scene, but it was meant to be different. Very different. Originally, Stitch was meant to hijack a commercial airplane and fly it through a city to save Lilo. In said attempt, he was actually going to crash the plane into multiple buildings. This may have seemed a fine scene at the time, and it was actually fully animated, but the tragic events of 9/11 obviously changed some things, and that scene was reworked. Number 3. The Frozen franchise was almost very, very different. Elsa is certainly a complex Disney princess, or in this case, queen. She had her fair share of struggles, and rather than learning how to overcome them as she does in Frozen, she could have gone a different way, and she almost did. In the original plans for Frozen, Elsa was actually meant to be evil, which is more aligned with the OG fairy tale that Frozen was based on. If you can believe it, Anna and Elsa weren't even sisters. This version ended with a big battle scene where that snow monster was actually one of many that made up an army led by Elsa. Pretty weird to imagine. In the end though, Anna and Elsa would team up and save Arendelle from a mutual enemy, Prince Hans. And Elsa wasn't the only beloved Disney protagonist who was very close to being not so nice. Number 4. Toy Story nearly had a bad guy as a main character too. Yep, Woody was supposed to be evil. In fact, we can hear Woody's actual voice, aka Tom Hanks, being just downright mean.
Get up here and do your job! Are you deaf?
Luckily, the execs decided that the jerk version of Woody and his verbal abuse of Slinky wasn't the best route to go with this story. Hence, the real Woody was born, and one of the most beloved animated features of all time came to be. Which made way for... Number 5. This film reunited Woody and his love Bo Peep. But it actually almost ended with a breakup between the toy couple. Needless to say, we're relieved we didn't have to see that. They put us through enough tears with Toy Story 3. Number 6. In an earlier version of The Little Mermaid, Ursula attempted to drown Prince Eric. She used her tentacles to strangle him and plunge him underwater. Ursula is certainly sinister as it is, but this is way too dark for a kid-friendly film. Number 7. Tangled was also almost too dark for a kid-friendly film. Mother Gothel was going to convince Flynn that Rapunzel was no longer with them. Yikes. Then Flynn was going to fall and end up blinded. These changes would have made the movie closer to the original fairy tale, but we're glad they changed it up. Number 8. The Jungle Book almost continued on after the ending we know and love, and things would have gotten pretty sad. In an early version, Mowgli reunited with his mother, but then a time jump showed that Mowgli no longer got along with his animal family. Then he would end up hunting down Shere Khan with a rifle. We're thankful the creators left Mowgli's future up to our imaginations. Number 9. Finding Dory nearly ended with some more lost friends. Some of Dory's friends were going to be left behind. With the release of Blackfish, though, the creators felt that folks had enough of sad whale stories, so they gave the characters a happy ending. Number 10. As Tarzan fans, we can't imagine this classic ending another way. Tarzan and Jane belong together amongst all of Tarzan's furry friends and family, right? Well, Tarzan almost actually abandoned his family and home to join civilization with Jane. Luckily, they changed this one. That would have been too sad. Number 11. We could have seen a sadder version of Encanto. In this version, Abuela sees a mural of her late husband, which inspires her to go find Mirabel, who ran away from home. Number 12. Luca nearly included one seriously nightmare-inducing villain. There was almost a giant kraken for the main characters to defeat. Ultimately, though, the creators of Luca wanted a film that didn't portray creatures from the deep sea as bad and dangerous. Since a giant kraken antagonist doesn't jive with that goal, he was cut. Number 13. What if Turning Red was way more intense? It almost was. It could have ended with two giant red pandas fighting like Godzilla and King Kong. Number 14. Soul almost took the concept of the Great Beyond a bit too far. In the original version, Joe visited the Great Beyond and returned. Yeah, it's best to avoid the afterlife discussion as much as possible in a family-friendly flick. What did you think of these dark endings that almost really happened? Do you like any of these endings better than the ones we actually saw?
Shrek is known for being hilarious for people of all ages, but to get adults laughing, some more adult-oriented moments are necessary. Some of these you may know already, but you probably missed what adult medication was snuck into Shrek 2, or the F-word the Shrek writer snuck into their first film. Don't worry, we'll bring you up to speed with our list of dark details in Shrek movies that went over our heads. Number 1. Kitty smells more than roses. In this scene from Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, Kitty gets cut off by Perito when he insists they stop to smell the roses. But the word that begins to form is definitely one you don't want to sneak into a kid's film.
All I smell is bullshit.
Number 2. They weren't talking about Easter. When Raoul is showing off his crude tattoos detailing the legend of the Golden Goose, he prepares to show Puss his golden eggs. Puss yells at him not to show him right after Raoul prepares to unzip, implying that the eggs are tattooed on a part of the human male body we can't show in this video, or that the 2 golden eggs Raoul was referring to was not a tattoo at all. Number 3. Donkey goes on a trip, but it's not the same one kids often go on. This is not the only time we'll be talking about younger people and the psychedelics they might have taken in their younger days. But for our first darker joke, Donkey in Shrek the Third switches bodies with Puss in Boots, stating that he hasn't been on a trip like that since college.
Man, I haven't been on a trip like that since college.
He's not talking about a trip to Niagara Falls, by the way. Number 4. More Shrek jokes, more subtle references to people's unmentionable parts. In Shrek Forever After, Shrek is trying to explain how he knows the Fiona from the world he fell into. He explains that Donkey fell into her waffle hole.
Next thing I knew, my donkey fell in your waffle hole. Right?
And her judgmental look is not only a reaction with confusion, but has a hint of offense. We get it. Number 5. It's all about the white Bronco. One scene in Shrek 2 was a reference to the show Cops. Titled Knights, the scene had jerky camera movements in the style of the long-running police show, and followed a literal white Bronco, a reference to Donkey's new form and a reference to the infamous O.J. Simpson police chase, in which he ran from the police in a white Bronco car. There is even a moment when catnip is found on Puss and he declares,
Catnip. That's no mine.
More drug references for all those kiddos at home. Number 6. We promised more jokes about high kids, and now we deliver. In Shrek the Third, Shrek and company visit a medieval high school. And no high school cliche is complete without your group of stoners.
Hello, bro. Don't burn all my frankincense and myrrh.
This group of students at the academy were depicted as hotboxing this carriage, rather than their parents' car or their own very cheap one. Number 7. Many are unaware of this expletive hidden in plain sight. The first Shrek film has a hidden F word. Lord Farquaad's name sounds different if you say it 10 times fast. Go ahead, pause the video and try it. Preferably not in front of your parents. We'll give you a hint, it ends in wad. Number 8. This list reveals Donkey is really the master of innuendo. In the first Shrek film, Donkey talks in his sleep and seems to be dreaming about getting intimate with someone.
Yeah, you know I like it like that. Come on, baby, come on my side. I give you right.
Donkey.
This is quickly interrupted when Shrek wakes him up for an egg breakfast. But we heard what we heard. Number 9. Not sure if you're aware of what easy means, but here we go anyway. The magic mirror in Shrek 1 says about Snow White,
although she lives with 7 other men, she's not easy.
Implying a woman is easy if she spends time with a lot of men. Very cool, mirror. And we're not talking video game difficulty options here. Number 10. There are many a joke about Farquaad's height.
Men of Farquaad's stature are in short supply.
But some of the more subtle jokes take aim at a different part of his body. When Shrek and Donkey go to visit Duloc, Shrek notices the immense height and size of Lord Farquaad's tower. He then says to Donkey that he might be compensating for something.
Do you think maybe he's compensating for something?
Implying that Farquaad might not be very well endowed. This innuendo was lost on the kids, but gave adults a good chuckle. Number 11. If you know what the word laid means, then you'll catch on to this one pretty quickly. When Robin Hood and his merry men make their musical debut in the first Shrek, his merry men talk up his bravery and character. As he is about to fight off Shrek and rescue Fiona, Robin says he likes a saucy little maid.
I like an honest fight and a saucy little maid.
And his men imply that he likes to get paid.
What he's basically saying is he likes to get paid.
Robin interrupts with that word for the kiddos, while adults know what Robin is really after and what originally would have been said instead. Number 12. This moment has now become infamous for kids turned adults who missed it. In one of the more discreet jokes in the first Shrek, Lord Farquaad is in bed and asks the magic mirror to show him Fiona again. The look on Mirror's face and Farquaad's quick peek under the covers will fill in the rest for what happens in this moment. No idea how we missed it the first time. Number 13. With an adult mind and very good eyes, some of you may have already caught this one. However, for those who didn't, in Shrek 2, when we are introduced to the potion-making factory, it seems one of the potions on the conveyor belt in Fairy Godmother's factory is simply labeled Viagra. Medicine really is magical. Number 14. This one is a little less hidden than the others, but we have to include it anyway, since it's probably the first adult-oriented moment you became aware of. In the Disney World parody of Duloc, while the puppets are singing, they seem to mess up and not rhyme a certain word correctly.
Please keep up on the grass, shine your shoes, wipe your face.
However, the fact that they show their little butts, pause, then say face, is really all you need to get as an adult to know that they were really leading us to think of a different word right here. Number 15. Are you attracted to the same thing you eat? It seems the wolf from Shrek certainly is. In the second Shrek film, when Prince Charming shows up to save Princess Fiona, He is instead met by Wolf, who is reading a Pork Illustrated and eating a bag of bacon-flavored chips. Pork Illustrated being a parody of Sports Illustrated, a magazine known for covering sports and sporty women. Number 16. Now for what might be the darkest joke from the entire Shrek franchise. Going back to the first Shrek film, one of the background jokes involving the three bears from Goldilocks and the Three Bears hides a sad, sad story. In one scene near the start of Shrek, all three bears are seen in cages, having been caught by Lord Farquaad's soldiers. In a subsequent scene, the daddy bear and baby bear are seen outside Shrek's house, looking sad, without Mama Bear present. Much later, towards the end of the movie, Lord Farquaad's living quarters are shown. On the floor of his room can be seen a rug that bears a clear resemblance to Mama Bear. Though it had in fact been known to Shrek devotees for years, many people were unaware of the very dark insinuation and running joke until the clips recently went viral on social media. However, in the DVD extras, Mama Bear can be seen dancing in the crowd during the big dance number, so take what you will from that. Those were all our favorite dark details in the Shrek movies that went over our heads the first time. Any of you notice that we didn't mention?
Hey!
Did you know that in the original Little Mermaid, Ursula cuts out Ariel's tongue? And then Ariel is forced to, shall we say, unalive Prince Eric? The Little Mermaid is based on a tale that is way, way darker. So get your popcorn and don't be afraid to hover your finger over that mute button. We've got the story that inspired The Little Mermaid, and things are about to get spooky under the sea.
Don't be scared.
Even Sebastian can't save you now. Number 1. Ariel was certainly unhappy at parts of The Little Mermaid, and for good reason. Yet in the original version, she was downright depressed. This version of the story was written by Hans Christian Andersen and came out way back in 1837. Like in the Disney version, in the original version, The Little Mermaid manages to save the human prince's life when he nearly drowns. But when no one knows that she was the one who did it, and she isn't recognized and can't communicate with the prince, she falls into a deep depression. Number 2. Back in The Little Mermaid's first iteration, the titular aquatic creature didn't have the name we now know her by. In fact, she had no name at all. Sure, one could argue that her name wasn't important to the story, or that there was another literary reason to refer to this character simply as what she is, a little mermaid. Yet, with a plot about a woman whose ability to speak is taken from her, there's a certain dark undertone about what her lack of name means about her lack of power and ownership over her life that we really don't think we should ignore.
That's right.
You know what else you shouldn't ignore? All the other amazing videos on the Things Animated. Like and subscribe for plenty more videos like this one.
Have we got a deal?
Number 3. Now back to the question at hand. Are mermaids immortal? When it comes to mythical creatures, there are always different variations, legends with different details, and debatable aspects of lore. For example, Lord knows Dracula fans don't believe that vampires sparkle in the sun. As for the OG Little Mermaid, however, the mermaid lore is a bit gruesome. In this story, mermaids live to be about 300 years old, and then they turn to sea foam. That's a pretty rough fate. And Ariel, Nameless Mermaid, agrees that this is pretty scary, which makes her commit even harder to getting her wish. Surprisingly, the whole seafoam thing isn't actually the worst part of being a mermaid in this story. Number 4. As the story goes, mermaids have no souls. Oh, so that's why Ariel's a redhead. Just kidding. The Little Mermaid has a grandmother, a character who's cut from the Disney version. We'll come back to that later. The Little Mermaid's grandmother answers a lot of her curious granddaughter's questions. When she asks her grandmother about whether humans die like mermaids do, she says that they live shorter lives than mermaids, but when mermaids die, that's it. There's no afterlife, there's no heaven, there's just a bunch of sea foam. Ever heard of sugarcoating things a bit there, Grandma? Number 5. As you can see, there's actually more incentive for the original Little Mermaid to want to become a human, because of the aforementioned seafoam thing, so we kinda get why she went for it. Kinda. But it turns out that the deal was actually worse in this version. In the version of The Little Mermaid that we're used to, Ariel understandably finds walking to be pretty difficult at first. In the original, however, part of the deal was that the Little Mermaid would be very graceful when she got her legs. Well, that's great. But as with everything in the spooky, scary version of The Little Mermaid, there's a pretty sizable catch.
I might be willing to make an exchange.
In this case, the catch is that walking would be extremely painful for the Little Mermaid. The Sea Witch's exact quote is, "Every step you take will feel as if you are treading upon knife blades so sharp that blood must flow."
But you'll have your man.
Sheesh. She's harsh. Number 6, and she only gets harsher.
Oh, and there is one more thing.
We all remember that in exchange for the ability to walk, Ursula magically takes away Ariel's voice. However, the original Sea Witch took things a bit more literally. She actually violently cut out Ariel's tongue.
No more talking, singing, zip.
This deal is sounding worse and worse by the second. Number 7, and it gets even worse when we discover that the original Prince Eric wasn't actually such a good catch. No pun intended. For starters, his favorite hobby is watching enslaved women dance. Yikes. But the Little Mermaid doesn't seem too upset by this. She even joins them to try to get his attention.
I was just trying to have some fun.
Furthermore, he refers to the mermaid as my dear little foundling, and is kind enough to allow her to sleep outside his bedroom door. Yeah, that's sarcasm if you couldn't tell. This kind of treatment sure isn't worth losing your tongue over.
He is quite a catch, isn't he?
Number 8. There's just one more thing that makes the deal even worse. According to the deal, if the prince decides to marry someone else, the Little Mermaid will turn into sea foam on the morning of his wedding day.
This is a catastrophe!
Surprising to no one, the jerk prince decides to marry someone else because he thinks that she is the one who saved his life when in reality it was the mermaid. Number 9. The original Little Mermaid had older sisters who were sirens. This means that they were mermaids who sang to lure in sailors and drown them. According to the story, the titular mermaid actually had an even more beautiful voice than her sisters, before her tongue got cut out, that is, but she didn't use it to commit any atrocities. Good for her. Number 10. If you think that the Little Mermaid's siren sisters are probably going to cause more trouble in this story, you had the right idea. On the morning of the prince's wedding, the sisters visit the Little Mermaid with, wait for it, a dagger. They've made a new deal with the Sea Witch, and rather than simply turning to sea foam as punishment for her heartbreak, she can kill the prince and go back to her normal mermaid life.
One less human to worry about.
But she says she can't bring herself to do it and accepts her sea foamy fate.
She really does love him.
Luckily, King Neptune himself appears and tells her that her kindness can earn her a soul and will give her a chance to make it to heaven, after living the rest of her life as a mermaid, that is.
You could go home with all the normal fish and just be miserable for the rest of your life.
Number 11. So that's kind of hopeful, maybe? But it's still an unhappy ending of sorts, since the prince never realizes the truth about who saved his life and doesn't pay attention to the Little Mermaid for long enough to notice that something is really wrong.
You haven't noticed.
Plus, she has to actually attend the wedding of the man she loves to a woman he's confused with her. No wonder Disney changed this story. Number 12. Disney made one change in particular that is interesting. Remember the Little Mermaid's grandmother that we mentioned? Well, in the original story, the grandmother helped the Little Mermaid cope with the loss of her mother. The grandmother didn't make it into the version of the story that we've all seen, which makes sense, since she existed mainly to deliver pretty dark truths about mortality. Interestingly though, many folks think that Sebastian was a character who was created as a stand-in for the Little Mermaid's grandmother, who of course is a lot more upbeat.
Don't you shake your head at me, young lady.
Number 13. So we're not really wondering why Disney made the tweaks to this story that they did. It's pretty obvious. But like us, you may now be wondering, why would someone write such a depressing fairy tale in the first place? The answer to that question is pretty interesting too. Hans Christian Andersen wrote The Little Mermaid after the wedding of his friend Edvard Cullen. Andersen had written love letters to Cullen, but it seemed that Cullen didn't have the same feelings in return. So, art imitates life in this story about someone sacrificing everything for the man they love, only to lose him to someone else in the end. Somehow, the inspiration for this story is even sadder than the story itself. You really outdid yourself there, Hans.
So long, lover boy.
Ariel!
Can you believe how wild this story got? What was your favorite part? Do you think there's anything they should have left in the Disney version?
It could be fun.
We've got to talk about it in the comments.
Oh my God!
We know. You can't wait for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. We are definitely with you there. That said, it's important to know the dark history behind the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles before watching the movie. Hold on to your shells, we're going in.
Man, I love being a turtle.
Number 1. Donatello was once resurrected. In Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles issue number 44, when Shredder discovers that a ruse was organized at his expense, he demands that Donatello be taken down. After the attack, Donatello is left with a weakened pulse, and Harold Lilia and Professor Honeycutt transplant his soul into a robot, creating a mind-blowing moment in TMNT history. Did you know that there's another mind-blowing moment that never actually made it into the storyline? Number 2. We're talking about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles episode Nightmares Recycled. And if you've never heard of it, there's a good reason why. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles animated series on Fox for Kids ran from 2003 through 2009. This series was more of a throwback to the OG comics than its 1987 predecessor series, which made it much darker. One episode, called Nightmares Recycled, was so unpleasant that it was tossed out altogether. The episode highlighted the origin story of the villain Garbage Man. Garbage Man was formerly the conjoined twin of HOUND, leader of the Purple Dragons. A back-alley surgeon separated the babies and threw the legless baby in the trash, while the other was raised by their parents. The abandoned baby grew up to become Garbage Man. He was meant to meet his end in the episode by falling into a vat of acid. For obvious reasons, this episode was deemed too disturbing for kids and scrapped. Yet they didn't scrap every disturbing origin story. Number 3. Do you know about Splinter's origin? No matter what version of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles you love, you know Splinter as a wise old martial arts master who treats the turtles like his children. He also happens to be a humanoid rat. How Splinter became a rat isn't consistent throughout every iteration, but some versions share a disturbing backstory. In some versions, Splinter is actually Hamato Yoshi, who was mutated into a giant rat by the substance that turned the Ninja Turtles into turtles. In these versions, Splinter frequently tries to turn himself back into a human, but never succeeds. Being trapped in the body of a rat is certainly an unfortunate fate. Another unfortunate fate is missing all the content we've got about your animated favorites on The Things Animated. Like and subscribe to see it all. Number 4. From Splinter's origin to the Turtles' origin, what is our hero's real reason for becoming Ninja Turtles? Splinter wants revenge on Shredder for the crimes he committed against Splinter's master. That's why he trains the Turtles to be the Ninja Turtles we know and love. While we may think of them as goofy guys, they exist solely to exact revenge, which leads us to... Number 5. Shredder's fate. Since their entire purpose is to get back at Shredder, Shredder is basically doomed from the start. In Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles number 1, the Turtles were basically hitmen determined to get Shredder. When they come face to face with him on a rooftop, they're pretty ruthless. They stab him repeatedly before throwing him off the roof. Not exactly what a group of good guys would do. Number 6. Speaking of Shredder, do you know where Shredder got his name? TMNT co-creator Kevin Eastman created Shredder while doing the dishes. He put a cheese grater on his forearm and imagined this as a villain's weapon. He considered naming the character the Grater or Great Man, but landed on the more ominous Shredder. A cheese grater as a weapon is pretty disturbing when you think about it. As for another character who's disturbing when you give him more thought, Number 7. It's Mr. Null. Mr. Null was a minor villain in the comics. He seemed to be your run-of-the-mill corrupt businessman who was destroying the environment. Later, readers discovered that he was actually Satan. He sold the Earth to an alien and was determined to destroy all humans. He's best known for his brutal takedown of the mighty Mutanimals, courtesy of killer cyborgs. His dark storyline kept him from being a better-known villain. But it wasn't the darkest storyline in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comics. Number 8. The Turtles faced quite a few tragedies in the 1996 Image Comics series. In addition to the aforementioned cyborgification of Donatello, the other Turtles also suffered some trauma. Splinter turned into a vampire bat, and Leonardo lost a hand. Raphael was shot in the face with a laser and left with massive scars. Still, this wasn't Raphael's most disturbing storyline. Number 9. Raphael withstood plenty of trauma. In the early comics, he was young and homeless with no memory of his past or where his family was. He ended up being cared for by a man named Buck until Buck was murdered in front of him. It's clear that he never fully recovered from this tragedy. Number 10. Some of Raphael's dark memories will always stay with him. But do you remember when Leonardo's memories were entirely altered? During the City Fall arc, which took place from issues 22 through 28, Kitsune changes Leonardo's memories and implants a memory of Splinter killing Leonardo's brothers. This causes him to betray his clan and follow Shredder as his master. When the changes to his memory fade, however, Leonardo returns to his friends, but struggles to forgive himself for turning against his group. Number 11. If you go back far enough in the comics, there's a beheading. In issue 50 of the main Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles series, Splinter beheads the Foot Clan's leader while a suicide ritual is taking place. It's clear that the Turtles are shocked and traumatized. Number 12. Slash's downfall also qualifies as shocking and traumatizing. During the Battle Lines story arc of issues 86 through 88, a bomb is surgically implanted in Slash. Slash ends up throwing himself out of a plane to ensure that the bomb detonates far away from the heroes. That's some pretty heavy stuff. Number 13. Casey Jones's backstory is equally heavy. When he discovers that his abusive father used to be Hun of the Purple Dragons, Casey finds it difficult to grapple with. When his father attempts to get him to join the Dragons, Casey refuses and he is beaten and nearly meets his end. We're sorry for reminding you of all those morbid mutant moments, but we gotta know, which moment did you find the most surprising? Let's talk about it in the comments, and for more videos like this one, make sure you like and subscribe to The Things Animated for all the latest.